A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki. ISKCON Svandaracharya Srila Prabhupada ki. Grantaraj Srila Prabhupada lilamrita ki. Shri Shri Nitai Mayapur Chandra ki. Shri Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman ki. Shri Ramnavami Mahotsava ki. Gaur Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 So this morning we're reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, chapter, well, it's volume 1, chapter 10. This momentous hour of need. And it begins with a little quotation from the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Prabhupada speaking in his humility, our capacity of presenting the matter in adequate language, especially a foreign language, will certainly fail. And there may be so many literary discrepancies in spite of our honest attempt to present it in the proper way. But we are sure that without all faults in this connection, the seriousness of the subject matter will be taken into consideration, and the leaders of the society will still accept this on account of its being an honest attempt for glorifying the Almighty Great, so much now badly needed. And I can say, dealing in foreign languages sometimes, wow, so not easy. Gee whiz. And the difference between knowing some words and being able to say a few things and actually speaking the language properly. Whew. Anyway, Prabhupada, English obviously was not his mother tongue. Bengali was. And he spoke Hindi, of course, that's very common in India. That North Indians will also speak Hindi. But now English is just a whole different story. Yes. So Prabhupada very humbly presenting it in that sense. But then Prabhupada also elsewhere, maybe in this, anyway, elsewhere at least, not right there, but somewhere else, Srila Prabhupada made the point that even if you're in a foreign country where they speak, a really foreign language, even if you don't really know the language, but if your house catches fire, you will convey the message. The people will get the message. So similarly, we may not be able to present a foreign language very, as the local people do, but if we really try our best, they'll get the message. Right, so here we go. And Srila Prabhupada is staying, it appears, that he's staying in the Keshevji Gaudiya Mat in Mathura, I suppose. So anyway, maybe there's a few of them, I'm not exactly sure. Keshava Gaudiya Mat, but I think it was the one in Mathura. Stayed there for a little while, trying to develop the preaching, although the devotees there just didn't really have the same mood or understanding or spirit of preaching. So Bhaktivedanta Swami, accompanied by some of the Keshavji Mat's devotees, made a short preaching tour of Agra, Kanpur, Jhansi and Delhi. But he was soon back in his own place at the Vamsi Gopalji temple. So Prabhupada's not actually living there in that Gaudiya Mat place. But he's staying in the Vamsi Gopalji temple in Vrindavan town. Those of you who are a little familiar with Vrindavan, you might know where that Vamsi Gopalji temple is. If you go from Radharaman, you turn left, you go past the Gokulananda temple, and you keep going, and it's right on a right-angled corner on the left side, a corner which turns away from it after you've been going straight down. The Vamsi Gopal temple is there, and Prabhupada's room where Prabhupada stayed is still there, although, it's not like being set aside as one of his places. It's just people stay there, but it's the room where Prabhupada stayed. Because these people, they build temples and they build extra rooms so they can rent them out and get money for running the temple and for whatever. Yes, so that's the case there where Prabhupada stayed. It's upstairs there. Right, so no one, because Prabhupada has now taken sannyas, no one called him Abai Babu any longer. Because Babu, whatever your first name is, Babu, was very common for people like householders or just people who are not sannyasis. So nobody called him Abai Babu any longer. Even amongst friends, it was Swamiji or Maharaj. And people often addressed him as Swami Bhaktivedanta Ji, Swami Maharaj, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. People readily recognized him as a sadhu and offered respect. Yet his basic problems remained. He wanted to write and print, but he had no money. He wanted to broadcast the message of Godhead, but few were willing to listen. Such things hadn't been changed by his becoming a Swami. When a librarian advised Bhaktivedanta Swami to write books, they were permanent, whereas newspapers were read once and thrown away. He took it that his spiritual master was speaking through this person. Yes, because up till that point, I don't know, I'd have to check back and see exactly when, like what year it was, but anyone remember offhand what year Prabhupada took sannyas? 59, was it? 59, yeah. September 1959. Right. So yes, Prabhupada up to that point in time had been printing Back to Godhead, not as a color magazine as it is now, but just as a black and white, like a little newspaper, you could say. And certain people, not on a big scale, but some people, they definitely appreciated it very much. And so they subscribed, and this way he had little money coming in, not a lot, but something. And he was able to live and continue printing. But then the librarian made this point, and Prabhupada talked about it from time to time, like when he was preaching in the Western world. He would talk about how he had been doing this little newspaper type publication, but then someone suggested print books because they're permanent, or much more permanent than little newspapers, cheap little newspapers. So Prabhupada really decided that he must do this. So he took it as a revelation from his spiritual master. As a dependent servant, constantly meditating on the desires of his transcendental master and seeking his guidance, Bhaktivedanta Swami felt his spiritual master's reciprocal blessings and personal presence. More and more, he was feeling confidential contact with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, and now he was feeling an inspiration to write books. Yeah, well, interestingly enough, today at 12, is it 12? Yeah, I think 12. I'm doing an online program with disciples of Kadamakanana Maharaj, and the subject is association. So I'll definitely be mentioning this, how Srila Prabhupada, and of course Prabhupada said on quite a number of occasions when people expressed ideas like, how are you doing what you're doing on your own? How is it? And Prabhupada would quite emphatically, often at least, he would quite emphatically say, I am never alone. My spiritual master is always with me. Yes, and I remember myself, I mean, for what it's worth, but I do remember very clearly, on Janmashtami 1973, we already had, George Harrison had donated Bhaktivedanta Manor. That was, I think, April, perhaps it was May, maybe it was May. But anyway, around that time, 1973. And devotees were living there, and, things were just going on there. And then Prabhupada came shortly after the devotees moved in. Perhaps it was June, or anyway, it was just shortly after they moved in. I guess they moved in May. Prabhupada came and stayed for a while, and on Janmashtami Day, 1973, Srila Prabhupada installed Shri Shri Radha Gokulananda, the main deities who are there. They're still there, of course, on the altar in Bhaktivedanta Manor. So I was staying in the road is called Berry Place in central London. London's a big place. There's two central areas. One is the financial district, where there's the banks and international financial institutions, and that's sort of about it. And then there's the West End, which is the shopping area. And it's big, it's really big. So, anyway, we had already a temple in the West End, just off the main street, Oxford Street. Oxford Street is a very long street, just shops, non-stop shops, and non-stop people. And our temple was in this very place, which was just off New Oxford Street, and it was from where Oxford Street itself starts, going back out to where Berry Place was. It was just less than one round chanter. That's what it was. Just less than one round. You couldn't chant a whole round unless you were one of these express chanters who, whose chanting may possibly not be so good. Anyway. But yeah, so it's like a 5-minute, 4-minute walk. And then you turn left, and that's Oxford Street, and the British Museum is just about 50, 60 meters further down at the end of Oxford Street. So anyway, Prabhupada was installing Gokulananda in Bhaktivedanta Manor that day, Janmashtami. And in the temple there in central London, in Berry Place, we were about 50 or 60 devotees, mainly brahmacharis. I'd say probably 50. I mean, if there were 60 devotees altogether, then there's probably 50 brahmacharis and half a dozen or several or 8 or something brahmacharinis, unmarried ladies, and there were a couple of householder couples, or maybe one, and they were probably not actually living in the, they were based there, they were serving there. So everyone wanted to go, because Prabhupada was there in Bhaktivedanta Manor, and it's a big occasion installing the deities, beautiful Radha Krishna deities. So everyone wanted to go. At the time, I was what's called temple commander. Temple commander, somehow they adopted that term. And meant I was, just the next one beneath the president. The president, I mean, not like a vice president, really, but just, like the foreman. So the temple president was Prabhu Vishnu Prabhu, and he came to me and said, one of us has to stay, because it was Janmashtami. And, there's a popular temple in central London. Like Sunday we'd get 50 to 100 people coming. So he said, one of us has to stay. And take a guess which one of us had to stay. It was me. I had to stay. So at first I felt a little, disappointed. A little bit, not too much, but definitely a bit. But then I remembered, I had read how Prabhupada, this point, Prabhupada saying that he felt his spiritual master's reciprocal blessings and personal presence. I remember Prabhupada had said that. I'd read that, and heard that on a number of occasions already. So I thought, well, it must be true. So I should accept that, and I should just get into it, and just get into serving Prabhupada, and with a conviction that he's with me. So I did. At least I tried. And, within, I'd say, half an hour, I would say I really felt the presence of Prabhupada. At least I felt, or I thought I was feeling. Who knows what I was feeling really, but I really felt, I was convinced I was feeling Prabhupada's presence. And it was really, for that day it was like a big thing, because I had to organize, the cooking, the deity worship, and the so many people. Eventually, I don't know how many, good few hundred people came, and the temple room, which was about half the size of this, had about 500 people in it, if you can imagine that. And it was a big program. It really was. And it was a great program. It was a really wonderful program. So I had to just keep on top of these things, or something along those lines. And I really felt the presence of Srila Prabhupada. And I think I did. And I really remained inspired and enthused through the whole day and until midnight, and then, program finished probably 1 o'clock or so. It was just great. And then the next day, Prabhupada's Vyasa Puja, then those who didn't go out for the deity installation, we went out for Prabhupada's Vyasa Puja, so that was great. That was really nice. Prabhupada gave a class which was recorded. Of course, it's in the Veda base, really interesting class. Boy, amazing class. And yes, so from that point on, I kept that in mind, that, that Prabhupada is always with me, and, as long as I'm engaged in his service. And it was just on an ongoing basis, and it remains a very important part of my life and my thinking. Yeah, so because, of course, because why? Because it's true. It's actually true. And these concepts, sometimes, some of them definitely are beyond our experience in material life. But because they're coming from scripture, or they're coming from parampara, coming from Prabhupada, we should know they're true. And make the effort to try to sort of assimilate them into our minds and into our hearts. So today I'm doing this program with the disciples of Kabbalah Khan Maharaj, and I will mention this. It's just really nice and very relevant. Right, so Prabhupada said, more and more he was feeling confidential contact with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, and now he was feeling an inspiration to write books. He considered Srimad Bhagavatam, because it was the most important and authoritative Vaishnava scripture. Although Bhagavad Gita was the essence of all Vedic knowledge, presented in a brief ABC fashion, Srimad Bhagavatam was elaborate. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati and Bhaktivinoda Thakur had both written Bengali commentaries on the Bhagavatam. In fact, most of the great Vaishnava acharyas of the past had commented on Srimad Bhagavatam. Lord Chaitanya himself had recommended Srimad Bhagavatam as the spotless Vedic literature. An English translation and commentary for this book could one day change the hearts of the entire world. And if he could publish even a few books, his preaching would be enhanced. He could go abroad with confidence and not appear empty-handed. Yes, well, it's not mentioned right here, but Srila Prabhupada made the point that he wanted to do Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. But if we talk about particularly Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada noted that there were a number, when he came to America, there were a number of translations and commentaries by different people on Bhagavad Gita. But Prabhupada noted very important and very practical point. Not one of them had produced one devotee of Krishna. And that is what Bhagavad Gita is. Bhagavad Gita, well, Prabhupada says it's a brief ABC fashion style of presentation of the truth. But it is specifically Lord Krishna's presentation for the novices, or at least the novices, or even sort of the pre-novices, those who are not devotees yet. But if they hear it nicely, if they read it nicely presented like that and nicely explained, then they may become devotees. So Prabhupada noted that point, that none of these versions of Bhagavad Gita had produced one devotee. And that's what Krishna is trying to do. Krishna is trying to convince people here, look, see, you must become devotees, all right? That's his point. But not a single one had become a devotee, because the presentations were not to the point. They were speculative presentations and so on. You know, sometimes, not so much recently, but in the past, when I would do programs like with Hindu audiences, which was, you know, a lot of the time, sometimes I'd ask, who's read Bhagavad Gita? And frankly, usually, no one would put their hand up. And then maybe they just don't want to feel embarrassed, or, you know, doing something like that in public, because maybe they're afraid Prabhupada would call them up and ask them to explain Bhagavad Gita or something. But nobody, I mean, generally nobody would put their hands up. Occasionally someone would. And so I would ask, what did you learn? What was the message? What did you learn from Bhagavad Gita? And some of them were just too stunned to say anything. But some would say, yeah, I learned that it's all one. Someone else, I remember, commented, said, I learned that we are all God. I remember someone else who said that I learned, when I read Bhagavad Gita, I learned there is no God. And someone else said, I learned that whatever path you're attracted to, you can take it, and it's fine. And in fact, Prabhupada was speaking to one man in Mumbai, back in those days, in maybe the 70s, but, you know, sometime. And this man said to Prabhupada that Swamiji, I am liking Bhagavad Gita too much. That's a lot. That's, you know, I found particularly Gujarati people who speak a bit of English, they would use this term that I like something too much, which basically doesn't mean actually too much, but they just like it a lot. Yes, I'm liking Bhagavad Gita too much. And particularly, well, there's one place right at the end, just not many verses before the end, Lord Krishna says to Arjuna that, okay, Arjuna, now you've heard from me, I'll explain everything to you. Now, You decide what to do. You do what you want. And of course, generally speaking, the people who actually heard, like Arjuna, he heard properly from the proper source. Then when they're told, you do what you like, then they become devotees. But this man, he came in and said, Swamiji, I am liking Bhagavad Gita too much. And particularly that place where Krishna says, hey Arjuna, now you have read Bhagavad Gita, now you just do whatever you like. Famous story. Just do whatever you like. Which, in a certain sense, you could say that maybe Krishna is saying that, but in another sense, it's like, when a person has become completely convinced by just, a first-class presentation, and you tell them, okay, what do you want to do now? Then they're going to do whatever the presentation told them to do. Yes, so Prabhupada noticed that people just don't understand Bhagavad Gita. And I don't know about any of you, but I tried to read, unsuccessfully, some version, I think it was the Penguin version, if you've heard of Penguin, they're big publishers of all sorts of books. So I got a copy of Bhagavad Gita, and I started reading it, and it made no sense. It just made no sense, so I put it down, and that was the end of that. Yes. So, and then, Bhagavad Gita's ABCs, and Srimad Bhagavatam is the in detail elaboration, clarification, expansion of all the points of Bhagavad Gita. So Prabhupada felt there's a particular need for the Bhagavatam to be translated and presented with proper purports and not just some mental speculation purports. Yes. So, Prabhupada. When Prabhupada first published Bhagavad Gita, very interesting. I don't know if you'll be able to find one of those books, the first printing. It was an abridged, not the whole thing, but with some purports, but not all the purports, and even the purports that were included, they were not like complete. And for the translations of the verses, Prabhupada had said, just use the Ramakrishna, their version of the Bhagavad Gita. Just use their translations. Because the logic was that, it's not complex Sanskrit, so at least the translations should be there correctly. But, then there'd be the purports to clarify. Unfortunately, the translations, some of them were not good. And particularly the one in the 18th chapter, where the duties or the natural activities of the Vaishyas those duties are listed out in that particular verse. Then it says, Krishi go raksha vanijyam. So Krishi, I think, means like doing business or trading. But go raksha, if you understand a little Hindi or Sanskrit, you understand? Go raksha. Huh? Yeah, raksha. In this case, due to the grammatical situation, is rakshya. but it means to protect. Yeah, if you have a friend named Raksha, you must know her name means protector. So they said, but they translated that something like trading or something like that, and cattle raising. Cattle raising. They translated Goraksha as cattle raising. So when Prabhupada went through his Bhagavad Gita, which had their translations, he saw that one, and he mentioned it a number of times later, that, this is just terrible. It just obviously says, do you understand any Hindi at all? No. Not really. Afrikaans? Okay. Anyway, yeah. Anyone who knows a little what to speak of Sanskrit, just Hindi, just a little, they know that Goraksha means cow protection. It's just obvious. But they put cattle raising. So Prabhupada was not appreciative. So then he decided he had to do his own translations, which just meant sort of extra work for him. So anyway, so like this. Prabhupada became inspired to print books and make that, the focus of his preaching strategy, you could say. His preaching endeavor was to present Krishna consciousness in the form of books. And, when Prabhupada was personally present, and I was living there in the temple in London, Prabhupada famously said, that if you meet someone in the street and you try and speak to them about Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada famously said, what will your 2-minute speech do? What effect will it have? But if they take a book, then it can change their life. Because, first point is they've got the real thing with the best presentation possible of the absolute truth. You can be there for years and years. There's still some of those old books existing. And that was, 60 years ago, or something along those lines. Yeah, so Prabhupada, his main thrust when it came to spreading Krishna consciousness was book distribution, it's a fact. And I remember when I first joined, January 1973, and there weren't many books. Books had not been printed in quantities. Even Prabhupada's complete Bhagavad Gita, ISKCON had not printed, but it was printed by the Macmillan Publishing Company. And it was a bit expensive. So book distribution was not being emphasized. And rather every day we would go out on Harinam. Because, the temple was like, what's the Adelaide Street, is it? The main street? Here? Adelaide. We were like a 5-minute walk from Adelaide Street. That's where we were. Really. Except Oxford Street is, the whole centre of London is just, I don't know how many times bigger and how many times more people, but it's really big. So we would just go out doing Harinam. 9 o'clock, we'd be out, come back for lunch at 12, be back out again between 1 and 2, come back about 6. And that was it. That was it. And anyone who was not able to come out and walk up and down the streets. They would stay in the temple and do the deity worship. And this was our program. But then it was sort of middle of the year. Book distribution started in the world on a large scale, and it started in London. So instead of going out every day on Harinam, we were going out on Harinam Saturday nights only, in London at least, only Saturday night. And the rest of the time, however many of us there were, 50 or something, we would just go out distributing books all day, every day. Because you just walk down the street and there you are. So, yes. So, Prabhupada thought if he could publish even a few books, his preaching would be enhanced. He could go abroad with confidence and not appear empty-handed. So, let's see, I'll just read another little bit and we'll stop. So Prabhupada, one day Gaurachand Goswami, proprietor of the Radha Damodar temple, approached Bhaktivedanta Swami, inviting him to come and live at the Radha Damodar temple. Being the eternal home of Jiva Goswami and Rupa Goswami, it would be more suitable for his writing and translating. Excuse me. Bhaktivedanta Swami was interested. He had never stopped his regular visits there. And he always felt inspired in the presence of the Samadhi tombs of the great leaders of Lord Chaitanya's movement, Jiva Goswami and Rupa Goswami. But when he went to look at the two available rooms, he found them in poor repair. They had not been maintained or lived in for many years. Not wanting to miss the opportunity, however, Bhaktivedanta Swami agreed to take the rooms at 5 rupees per month. He estimated that for a little more than 500 rupees, he could have electricity installed and extensive repairs made, and when it was finished, he could move in. So 5 rupees, that was the rent. And it remained the rent until he went to America. And even, I think, while he was in America, one way or another, he was paying 5 rupees. And you know what 5 rupees is worth now? Well, it's worth about 1 rand and 20 cents. And, our rands are officially funny money now. You're better off with monopoly money, almost. But anyway, it was not much. It was not much. It was probably in those days, I remember I went there first, 76, it was 8 rupees to $1. Now it's about 85. So a few years before, maybe it was $1 a month. Yes, so Bhaktivedanta Swami saw the invitation as auspicious, and living there would complement his new project of presenting Srimad Bhagavatam in English. Of all Vrindavan's temples, Radha Damodar had the largest collection of original writings by the 6 Goswamis and their followers, more than 2,000 separate manuscripts, many of them 300, some even 400 years old. Bhaktivedanta Swami looked forward to residing there someday and serving in the company of Srila Rupa Goswami and Srila Jiva Goswami. For now he would remain at the Vamsi Gopalji temple, and with whatever money he could collect, he would gradually repair the rooms. Hare Krishna. So devotees, there you go. Any comments or questions? Yes, Radha Jane.
Thank you for class, Maharaj. You spoke about the examples of people who reflected back what they had learned from Bhagavad Gita, which was a little bit absurd.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those was whatever path resonates with the person they can follow. Something like that. So I wondered how that relates to Lord Krishna's different options that he presents for Arjuna,
Right.
where he
Okay.
says, if you can not...
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point, very important point actually. You know, what Krishna is doing is summarizing, really summarizing in compressed forms all the main philosophies presented in all the Vedic literatures. You know, not all of the philosophies, but all the main ones. And then he's showing that out of all of them, Bhakti Yoga is the best. Not just the best, but actually the topmost, the highest. And therefore, though people who have studied the Vedas and are interested in following the Vedas and take the Vedas seriously and want to apply them in their lives, they should become devotees. But unfortunately, not everyone sees it in that light. Although Krishna makes it, clear enough for any intelligent person, it's clear enough that this is the idea, to become a devotee. But unfortunately, the people, there's not so many intelligent people. Like, famous saying that the problem with common sense is that it's not so common. Yeah. And the problem with, intelligence is that not so many people have it. They may have, intelligence in the sense of understanding the truth of life. They may have what Prabhupada called material cleverness. That's what Prabhupada called it. To get a degree and, or execute some, like medicine or something like that, you got to have some brain power. So, but Prabhupada would call that sometimes material cleverness as opposed to intelligence. Because intelligence really means to be able to distinguish truth from fiction. And in that way, develop your life on the basis of truth and really avoid the fiction. But unfortunately, so many people don't understand that because they don't have real intelligence. So, what Prabhupada said, one thing he said, is that Bhagavad Gita, many people take it to be something like a box of assorted chocolates. And, box of assorted chocolates. You like one type, you like another type. You're not so keen on the type he likes, but there's another type you like. He likes a different type and he's not so keen on the two that you like. And so like this, it's just based on personal preference and not on what is real value. Because how there can't really be the question of real value in terms of a box of assorted chocolates. It's just a variety to capture the interests of as many people as possible. So yeah, that's what Prabhupada said. But actually, so the people think, those types of people think, there is not really a point to Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita is simply presenting different options, and it's up to you to decide, because, as Krishna said, as we mentioned towards the end of Bhagavad Gita, okay, Arjuna, now you've heard from me, now you decide. Yeah. But they don't understand the point of that. They think that it's just, you just decide. If you like Hatha Yoga, go for it. If you prefer worshipping demigods, just go for it. If you prefer doing austerities, go for it. Whatever. Just go for whatever appeals to you. And on that basis, there's a particular sort of concept developed. It's called Yatamata Tatapata. As many people, or as many opinions, mata sort of means opinions, as many opinions, as many paths. Yeah. Or as many people, as many paths, or as many opinions, as many paths. And you just figure out, what is my opinion? What do I think? And then that's your path. And that's a famous impersonal, sort of like a slogan kind of thing. Yeah. But Prabhupada, this is not exactly the point, but it's very connected. Prabhupada was speaking, it's in the conversations books. Prabhupada speaking to some young men, Hindu men in India. And they're sort of, they're quite proud of their Hinduism, and they think they know, they understand it. Prabhupada's trying to preach to them, but then they say, we understand that service to man is service to God, so that's what we do. In other words, we're not going to become devotees of Krishna, but we're into serving mankind, because service to man is service to God. And then Prabhupada responded in a very interesting way. If service to man is service to God, then service to God is service to man. Isn't that a good one?
Yeah.
If 6 equals half a dozen must equal 6. It's such a good point. And then Prabhupada said that, the point ultimately, in a sense, is which is the easiest. Is it easier to serve humanity, or is it easier to serve God? And Prabhupada referred to Bhagavad Gita chapter 9 verse 26, Patram Pushpam Phalam Toyam, just offer me with love and devotion a leaf, flower, fruit or water, I'll accept it. So Prabhupada presented that verse, and Prabhupada said, just see how easy it is to serve Krishna. Just one leaf. Just one leaf. Just here we got enough leaves. And if we just offer one leaf with devotion, he'll accept it. But serve humanity. Serve humanity means all 8 million of them, or whatever the figure is. Well, good luck. You would need too much of it. Yeah. So Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Okay.